Urgent! Shock! The Russians have been driven into a brutal trap. Putin is losing Africa. The Russians are fleeing in desperation. The blood of shame. Total fiasco of the African corps in Mali. Russian mercenaries are being destroyed live on air. The events of this night have put an end to the Kremlin's plans. Putin's elite units have suffered a fiasco. The Caucasus has declared war on the Kremlin. The Chechens are preparing to storm Moscow, and Azerbaijan has become Ukraine's military fist. Putin is in total encirclement. Shock! The backbone of Russian logistics has been broken forever. Robert Mazerbro, who makes the Kremlin's knees buckle, the architect of heavenly retribution, has created a system from which the enemy cannot escape. A sensational escape. Orbán is packing his bags. Putin's friend is preparing for a secret evacuation. Could he really have decided to betray everyone in the Kremlin? All this and more in our program Hotspot. Russia is being kicked out of Africa. A catastrophe in Mali. The Russian African Corps has suffered a bloody defeat. The myth of invincibility has collapsed. Russian mercenaries are shamefully fleeing from the city they considered their trophy. Watch everything about Putin's loud fiasco. Russia is suffering a collapse in Africa, including in Mali. The day before, fighting broke out again in the northern city of Kidal between Tuareg rebels, jihadists, and government forces supported by Russian mercenaries from the African Corps of the Russian Ministry of Defense.
This morning, fighting resumed in Kidal. We want to drive out the last Russian militants who have taken refuge in the camp, said Mohammed Ramdan, a representative of the Tuareg rebels.
On the Telegram channel of the African Corps, it was reported for their part that the joint attack by Tuareg rebels from the Popular Front for the Liberation of Zawad and militants from the Jama'at Nasr al-Islam wal-Muslimin group began on Saturday at around 5:30. About 10 to 12,000 people took part in the attack. The Ministry of Defense structure accused Western and Ukrainian intelligence services of training militants to attack government troops and Russian mercenaries.
The Russian side presents this accordingly as an action by the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine in terms of training UAV operators, as well as planning and conducting offensive operations by opposition representatives. Moreover, the reduction of the Russian Federation's military presence on the African continent primarily serves the political interests of our country. To deny the possibility of actions by Ukrainian intelligence services, specifically the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, conducting military operations on the African continent, in my opinion, there is not the slightest reason.
The African Corps estimated the militants' losses at more than 1,000 terrorists. Regarding their own losses, they only reported that there were wounded.
Any official acknowledgement of defeat is extremely dangerous for the Russian Federation.
The African Corps claims that the jihadists tried to seize the presidential palace in Mali's capital, Bamako, and attack the major cities of Gao, Kidal, Koti, and Ségou.
Thanks to the courage and heroism of the servicemen of the African Corps of the Russian Armed Forces, a Syrian scenario was prevented in Mali.
Russian media even managed to film reports from the city of Koti, where they showed everything in a way that suited them.
We are in Koti on one of the streets where the fighting took place. There are destroyed houses there.
Those terrorists, they arrived here, you see, on a motorcycle. That's right. But they had bombs.
But now the situation has stabilized. Now people are calmly dealing with the aftermath. If there are any militants left, they have been pushed further away from the city. And now the military is carrying out a sweep operation.
However, in reality, this is one of the largest coordinated attacks by Islamists and Tuaregs in recent years. The Tuaregs have reported the capture of the city of Kidal. The French TV channel France 24, citing AFP, reported that in Mali, the Tuaregs and jihadists agreed on the withdrawal of Russian mercenaries from the Russian Ministry of Defense's Africa Corps from the base in the city of Kidal. Videos have appeared online showing Russian military equipment passing by jubilant Islamists without a fight. Several Russian Z channels have reported the withdrawal of personnel and equipment of the Russian Ministry of Defense's Africa Corps. However, the Telegram channel Rybar, which is affiliated with the Russian Ministry of Defense, denied the withdrawal of Russian mercenaries from Kidal, calling it an evacuation of the wounded.
This is already the tactic of the Russian Federation, not to comment on military defeat.
The day before, these images appeared online showing a helicopter shot down near the city of Gao, which is claimed to have belonged to the coalition of Mali's military junta forces and mercenaries from the Africa Corps of the Russian Ministry of Defense. Ilya Tumanov, a Z-blogger close to the Russian aerospace forces, also known as fighter bomber, stated that a Russian helicopter was lost in Africa. The crew was killed. According to the French newspaper Le Figaro, citing a source in Mali, in the city of Koti, 15 kilometers from the capital Bamako, Defense Minister Sadio Kamara and several members of his family were killed. Kamara was a key ally of Russia. As international agencies explained, the main military base of the junta is located in Koti. The death of the defense minister was also officially confirmed by Mali's own military government.
Here is where the house of our minister is located. The house of our defense minister. Here it is. They came and started bombing.
After the 2021 coup, Mali has been ruled by a military junta led by interim President Assimi Goïta.
In the nation of Mali, the reins of power are currently held by a military-led government junta that is deeply and fundamentally integrated with the Russian Federation.
The Wagner PMC helped them maintain control, but after Prigozhin's mutiny, it was replaced by the African Corps of the Russian Ministry of Defense.
This is because the country is rich in gold. It should be noted that Mali ranks third in terms of gold mining and sales on the African continent. In addition, Mali is a country with a total area of 1,200,000 square kilometers. That is, it is one of the largest countries on the African continent. Well, besides gold, there are also a number of other mineral resources there, control over which is extremely important for the Russian Federation. These include gas and oil.
The Tuareg stronghold of Kidal was recaptured by Wagner PMC mercenaries in November of 2023. It is a town of 15,000 people in the desert north of Mali. It had been a stronghold of the Tuareg separatists for more than 9 years.
Historically, until 1960, the nation of Mali was a territory under French colonial rule, and accordingly, the presence of the Russian side is perceived by the French as a reduction of their economic and political influence on the African continent. Therefore, I do not rule out that the actions of the Tuaregs are backed by the intelligence services of France and a number of other world powers that consider the African continent a zone of their strategic interests.
According to reports from global agencies and regional publications, things became quiet in Kati on Sunday and the shooting stopped. In Gao, according to some reports, there is also a lull. AFP reports that the rebels have taken up positions on the outskirts of the city. Meanwhile, reports from Sivas indicated that firefights were still ongoing.
Urgent! This is the end of the pseudo-empire, a Caucasian revolt in the very heart of Russia. While the Kremlin dreams of victories, a deadly conspiracy has taken shape right under its nose. The Chechens are secretly preparing to seize power in Moscow. The dictator is being prepared for the fate he feared most of all. And then there's Baku and Kyiv, a union that erased Moscow. The Islamic world has decided to put an end to the Russian Federation. Watch for all the details.
Very soon, an Islamic Maidan could begin in Moscow. This was stated by Ruslan Kutayev, head of the Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus. This organization has been declared terrorist in Russia. The coup is to be carried out by Muslims, Uzbeks, Tajiks, Kyrgyz, Azerbaijanis, and people from the Caucasus who are currently living in Moscow and St. Petersburg.
Russia has a tradition. Whoever takes the capital takes the country. 3.5 to 4 million people who practice Islam, Caucasians and representatives of Asian peoples. The Assembly of the Peoples of the Caucasus has established excellent relations with all the leaders of the Asian peoples, and at 0 hour, when action is needed in Russia, we will act. Then only with our approval will the authority that will govern Russia be established.
Right now, these forces are simply waiting for the Kremlin to weaken in order to start an armed uprising. The coup itself could already begin at the end of the summer. The possibility of a Maidan led by armed Muslims is also acknowledged by Russian military analyst Yuri Podolyaka.
I think further commentary here is unnecessary. So, is anyone still smiling at the idea that the enemy is preparing a comprehensive attack against us aimed at internal destabilization, which I expect to be most likely and convenient to carry out in August-September of this year? Personally, I don't find it funny at all. I've already seen this scenario back in 2013 in Ukraine, and it ended in complete success for the organizers. I wouldn't want something like that to happen in Russia. Meanwhile, it's obvious to me personally that this is exactly the plan our enemies have, and they will do everything they can to implement it using all available tools: our mistakes, the armed forces of Ukraine, terrorists, interethnic issues, economic difficulties, and so on.
What do we have on our side? People who, if necessary, will tear heads off, take down anyone, go to the barricades and build those barricades themselves. That's why we created this Moscow fist, so that no matter what kind of force it is, whether it comes from the front lines, from the trenches, or whether the FSB mobilizes them as the Russian community, no one will be able to crush our Moscow core, the one we built in St. Petersburg.
The Muslim world is strongly opposed to the Kremlin, and a coup in Moscow is quite possible, considering the number of Muslims who live and work in the capital of the Russian Federation. The Kremlin has tense relations not only with Muslims inside the country, but also with neighboring countries that practice Islam. The year 2025 in relations between Russia and Azerbaijan was defined by the incident involving a plane shot down by Russian air defense systems. Not so long ago, Kremlin propaganda against the backdrop of this conflict was actively threatening to destroy the Caucasian country. But just last week, the Kremlin tried to convince everyone that it was simply an emotional crisis. Meanwhile, Ukraine is only strengthening its relations with the Muslim world. Recently, a Ukrainian delegation visited Turkey, and afterwards, together with their Turkish colleagues, our diplomats also traveled to Syria. This past weekend, the president of Ukraine paid a visit to Baku and met with the president of Azerbaijan, Ilham Aliyev. This is already their 7th meeting in just over 4 years. This time, 6 documents were signed in various fields. Cooperation in the defense sector and energy became the key areas of negotiation. The parties agreed to deepen their work in these areas.
We have elevated our relations to a higher level. Our cooperation has a very strong political foundation. As for military technical cooperation, we also discussed this issue. There are also quite broad prospects both in Ukraine and in Azerbaijan.
Today, the number one priority is security, specifically the defense industry. Ukraine has demonstrated resilience during this war against the aggressor and today shared its experience. And these are very important areas that will definitely enhance both the security of our countries and our peoples, as well as the trade turnover, which we truly want to increase between our countries.
Special attention was given to humanitarian support for Ukraine, as well as to what Azerbaijan can do to help bring about a swift end to the Russian Federation's aggression. The war in Ukraine is triggering irreversible processes of division within Russia itself, while Russia's eastern neighbors are simply distancing themselves from any interaction with an unpredictable aggressor. And these factors play into Ukraine's hands.
Shock! This is a new era of bloody retribution. Robert Madyar Brovdi became the chief architect of victory in the skies. His drone warfare tactics are breaking the backbone of Russian logistics and burning through reserves before they even reach the front. Madyar has launched a conveyor belt of destruction that cannot be stopped. Watch how this man is turning the tide of the war.
The hunt never stops. The Ukrainian armed forces give Putin's soldiers no rest. The drone systems forces, together with other defense units, have effectively turned the use of drones into a daily conveyor belt for destroying enemy resources.
The drone systems forces are, in a sense, a revolutionary unit, a truly revolutionary branch of the military, which, except perhaps in the Russian Federation and at some embryonic level in China, practically does not exist in other countries. This is a unique branch of the military that sets the relevant trends, and I believe that in the future, leading armies of the world, such as the United States and NATO armies, among others, will follow its example.
In just the first 20 days of April, the units disabled 18 enemy air defense targets in the temporarily occupied territories. The most recent targets were the radar station of the S-350 Vityaz system and the Torem 2KM surface-to-air missile system. The systematic destruction of enemy air defenses paves the way for Ukrainian drones to reach strategic targets deep within Russian territory. For example, as a result of strikes on oil infrastructure, Russia loses about $100 million in revenue every day. This was reported by the commander of the Ukrainian Armed Forces Drone Systems, Robert Brovdi, call sign Madyar.
In fact, $1 million, $10 million, hundreds of millions of dollars. All these losses matter. They do not fill the Russian budget. They are not used to purchase new weapons or any new equipment. They simply do not go into the budget to be used for sustaining the war against Ukraine. In other words, Russia's ability to expand purchases and financial support for the war is being limited.
Brovdi has become one of the symbols of the technological transformation of the armed forces of Ukraine. Under his leadership, a concept was implemented in which no enemy equipment can approach Ukrainian positions unnoticed. The combination of aerial reconnaissance and instant strikes by FPV drones has radically changed defensive tactics.
The forces of unmanned systems and the units directly engaged in this field ensure the destruction of the enemy, containment of the enemy, offensive operations, reconnaissance operations, and today are the most effective by a number of indicators. And the enemy does not have time to adapt in a timely manner to our changing tactics.
Brovdi began his service as a volunteer and created an aerial reconnaissance unit, which grew from a platoon into a powerful structure. Since 2025, he has been appointed commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces, which have become the digital intelligence of the Ukrainian army. Thanks to their developments, Ukraine is leading the global race in defense technologies, turning the battlefield into a space of robotic systems.
According to the Ukrainian president's assessment, the front line is currently almost at the same position as it was a year ago. And this is quite telling considering the serious issues of understaffing within Ukraine's defense forces. In other words, it is precisely the unmanned systems on the front line that have enabled Ukraine's defense forces to conduct an effective form of active defense. Moreover, it was precisely the unmanned systems that created the conditions for successful Ukrainian counteroffensives.
The power of unmanned systems accomplished what previously seemed impossible. They have completely eliminated the concept of a safe rear for the occupiers.
As of today, the unmanned systems forces provide not only control over the line of engagement in the low sky, but also over specific locations and sections of the front where enemy offensive operations are taking place. But we are now achieving control deeper than the immediate rear zone, controlling the enemy's logistics, destroying their logistics, and reaching distances of 50 to 60 kilometers. We are not simply remaining stationary, only directly positioned along the line of contact itself, continuously remaining inside the kill zone, but are actively advancing much deeper into enemy territory.
Even the Kremlin's mouthpieces can no longer remain silent about the reality. Russian propagandists are increasingly admitting the helplessness of their army in the face of Ukraine's technological breakthrough and the new tactics of the armed forces of Ukraine.
Shock! Orbán's mafia is packing their bags. Peter Madyar blew up the world with the truth. Billions of euros are being withdrawn from Hungary. A great escape is being prepared. Where will Orbán hide? Could it be that Putin's loyal ally has decided to betray everyone and save himself alone? The Western press exploded with the sensation. See all the details?
Viktor Orbán's mafia is moving money out of Hungary. This was stated by the newly elected Prime Minister of the country, Peter Madyar. According to Madyar, the oligarchs are transferring tens of billions to the United Arab Emirates, the USA, Uruguay, and other distant countries.
Both Orbán and Szijjártó have probably already received the Order of Lenin from Russia for their work on its behalf. In other words, this was a direct hint that you are corrupted by Russia, and in fact, energy resources, the supply of energy resources to Europe through Hungary and Slovakia, are considered to be the very thing that allowed Russia to corrupt officials in Hungary and Slovakia for many years.
The Orbán-linked oligarchs started scrambling not just for nothing, but with the intention of fleeing. In this regard, Peter Madyar called on law enforcement agencies to arrest the violators and freeze their assets.
In fact, issues of corruption are among those that led to Orbán's defeat in these elections. If we now recall those leaks of conversations that took place before the elections in Hungary, there were talks between Péter Szijjártó, Hungary's Minister of Foreign Affairs, and the Russian Minister of Foreign Affairs, where essentially the ministers discussed Hungary's initiative to request the removal of the sister of Russian billionaire Alisher Usmanov Dilbar from the sanctions lists. And accordingly, this whole story raises the question, wasn't the Hungarian government essentially running errands for Russia, for Russian oligarchs who were using the Hungarian state authorities to resolve their own issues?
In his statement, Madyar also draws attention to the fact that several families of Hungarian oligarchs have already left the country.
Undoubtedly now, as the inauguration of the new Hungarian government is about to begin, let me remind you, this will happen on May 9th. I think it would be logical, as they say, to review what has been done so far. And right here, a truly vast and huge amount of critical information may soon surface regarding the multitude of underlying reasons why certain political decisions were made by Viktor Orbán, his Hungarian Foreign Minister Péter Szijjártó, and various other high-ranking officials of the outgoing Hungarian government.
Orbán's friend, the multi-billionaire Lorink Mészáros, is also preparing to flee with his family to Dubai in the near future.
The European Union somehow believed that nothing like this would ever happen. So they didn't specify the details of how a country could be excluded from the EU, because they thought, well, how could that even be possible? But times have changed. The realities of the times have changed. And now we see more and more hints that the European Union needs to undergo deep reforms, that a lot needs to change in its policies, and also to provide for the possibility of excluding a country. Because the countries that were admitted, say, in 2004 to the EU as, let's say, clear pro-European states, are now changing their logic. And essentially, they are becoming pro-Russian, as has essentially happened with Hungary. And that is why the European Union needs to be prepared for the moment when the leaders of the Eurozone countries that are part of the EU will be running to Russia.
Viktor Orbán has refused his mandate in the newly elected parliament. Journalists have reported that he is preparing a refuge for himself in the United States in case of legal proceedings in Hungary.
Poland is pressing the red button. Secret exercises are direct preparation for battle with the Russian Federation. Warsaw is no longer waiting for a strike, it is preparing to repel it. While the Kremlin tries to scare the world with Iskanders, Poland is testing a plan for an instant response. How does Warsaw plan to bury Russian aggression? Watch.
Poland is rehearsing war with Russia. The Polish authorities are preparing large-scale closed exercises under the codename EDGE. During the exercises, the Poles will practice the actions of the state in the event of war. Thus, the president, the government, and the military command will all be involved. The scenario and details of what will happen remain classified.
Today is just rumors, but tomorrow it could be real actions. Namely, that in 2027, Russia is planning to test NATO's Article 5 for strength by attacking one of the European countries. Moreover, at this stage, two possible scenarios are being discussed. The first scenario is Narva in Estonia, that Russia will try to seize part of the EU country Estonia. The second scenario, which is larger in scale, is the Suwałki corridor.
Polish journalists reported on the exercises, citing sources and comments from official representatives. The Polish Ministry of Defense confirmed that information about the participants' preparations, scenarios, and the location of the exercises is highly classified.
There was talk that it was necessary to physically secure a land connection between Belarus and the Kaliningrad region. And what needs to be done to achieve that? Attack Lithuania, well, the territory bordering the Kaliningrad region, and attack Poland. That's why Poland, probably the strongest of these four countries, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and accordingly Poland, understands that to be forewarned is to be forearmed. Accordingly, preparations must be made for a possible war with Russia.
On the eve of the exercise preparations, Polish President Karol Nawrocki held a meeting with key generals. On this occasion, even the government and the president's team, who usually have policy disagreements, cooperated.
They are producing a large number of new tanks. In the war against Ukraine, we hardly see these tanks at all. So the question arises, if the country is waging an active war that requires military resources, that requires new tanks, these new tanks exist, but they are not on the front line. This indicates that they are being prepared for some other operation. And here we can only guess what that might be. One possibility is that they are being prepared for an attack on Poland. Well, I mean the Suwałki Gap, so not exactly Poland. It's the border between Poland and Lithuania, which is more than likely. Therefore, it is quite possible that this year, 2027, which is being mentioned, is actually a very realistic time frame when Russia, while continuing its full-scale war against Ukraine, might simultaneously try to attack EU countries as well. Moreover, if it is Poland and Lithuania, that would be a significant move. Much more significant than if it were Narva in Estonia.
The exercises will not have a classic character. Within their framework, they will simulate strategic decisions, in particular the introduction of martial law, coordination of government bodies, and responses to crisis scenarios.
The world changed after the end of World War II. Wars did not end, but no one uses the term war anymore. Therefore, this will be yet another such harsh escalation. And will it lead to many countries being involved? Most likely it will.
Under normal circumstances, such drills should take place once every 4 years. In practice, the last time they were held was back in 2019, that is, before Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine.
Moscow, attention. Ukrainian thunder is already in the sky. The first missile is flying straight into Putin's bunker. Shock! The button has been pressed. Ukraine is wiping out the Kremlin with ballistic missiles. Where will the first greetings from the Ukrainian armed forces land, and why will no one be able to escape? Watch!
Ukraine is preparing weapons capable of reaching the very heart of Russia.
Lubyanka simply needs to be wiped off the face of the earth. I like the way you think. Wipe Lubyanka off the face of the earth. Well, there are a huge number of them. The General Staff, the Ministry of Defense, the General Staff, the Ministry of Defense, and the Moscow oil refineries. What? Almazante, what else? Maybe Krunichev, Zvezda, Strela. All of them. Red Square wouldn't hurt to, clean it up. Yeah, clean it up.
By the middle of 2026, Ukrainian developers promise to take their own ballistic technology to a new level.
The first ones should come in just like kids going to school.
We're talking about the FPV-7 and FPV-9 missiles, which are capable of radically changing the geography of the war. If today the strike range is limited to hundreds of kilometers,
we can make a lot per day. We'll produce as many as are ordered.
Then in the coming months, the range will increase to 850. And that's enough to threaten not only the border regions, but Moscow itself.
Now, strikes like these have already begun, and Russia is really demonstrating our capabilities.
Moreover, we're not just talking about pinpoint strikes, but potentially massive use. According to the developers, dozens of missiles can be launched simultaneously, 20, 30, or even more. And in this case, even modern air defense systems become overloaded. Intercepting such a stream of targets becomes a task at the very limit of capability, even for systems like the Patriot, let alone the Soviet-era systems in Russia.
It's difficult for them to intercept such missiles.
Each of these missiles fulfills its own mission on the battlefield, and together they form a new strike architecture, FPV-7.
The very first successful launch, which was an officially confirmed success, took place in the city of Taganrog. When we finished off the A-50 in the hangar, which had come in for some additional equipment,
this ballistic missile is considered a more accessible tool. It has a range of up to 300 kilometers, a warhead of up to 250 kilograms, high accuracy and relatively low cost.
It's kind of a replacement for ATACMS. It's cheap.
Such a missile allows you to systematically take out enemy depots, headquarters and logistics deep behind the front lines. FP9 is a completely different level. Its range is up to 850 kilometers with a warhead of up to 800 kilograms. This is essentially a transition to a fully operational tactical ballistic missile. We're talking about striking strategic targets, from military facilities to key infrastructure deep inside Russia. Both missiles are launched from the same mobile launcher, similar to the one used for the Flamingo system. This means rapid deployment, stealth, and the ability to quickly change positions, making detection and retaliation more difficult. Moreover, the European anti-ballistic shield will be created based on the FPV-7 missile.
Right now, we are planning to create a pan-European anti-ballistic shield based on the FP7, because this missile has a vertical launch, quickly tilts, is highly maneuverable, and it was originally designed to intercept ballistic targets.
In addition, FPV drones the size of the Flamingo missile will appear in Ukraine. Another step toward expanding the range of strike weapons. And while Ukrainian developers are ramping up their own capabilities, in Russia so far they've only brilliantly developed the method of intimidation. And the well-known Oreshnik ballistic missile has proven to be pointless in modern warfare.
It's a truncated intercontinental missile. They cut off one stage. It's a medium-range missile designed to carry nuclear warheads. It is incapable of carrying conventional weapons. Nobody needs this. It's just a waste, just to show that we can launch the Oreshnik. Well, good for you. Such missiles only make sense for nuclear armament.
Ukraine once again proves what matters is not the number of people or kilometers on the map, but the ability to build a system step by step that turns technology into real results on the battlefield. And it seems that in the near future, Erefia will fully experience all the delights of Ukrainian developments.
That's all for now, but for more smart news from the front, tune in to the next episode.